Hello, and welcome to Badger Talks Live, which brings exciting happenings, resources, and talent from your UW flagship campus to the people of Wisconsin and beyond. I am Maeve Hogan, a third-year PhD student studying design history in the School of Human Ecology. I'm originally from New York, and my work here focuses on material culture and distinctions between art, craft, and design in the 19th and 20th centuries. During the month of October, Badger Talks Live is proud to highlight some of the trending topics coming out of the UW School of Human Ecology. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Sarah Ann Carter, who is the director of the Center for Design and Material Culture and an associate professor in design studies. Today, she will be talking about how, for the past 25 years, UW-Madison has been a leader in the study of material culture. She will also address the history and future of material culture studies on our campus through the new exhibit, Questioning Things, a quarter century of material culture studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Prior to joining the School of Human Ecology, Sarah was the curator and director of research at the Chipstone Foundation in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where she collaboratively curated many museum exhibitions and directed the think tank program in support of progressive curatorial practice. She has been working in and around museums since the age of 13 and is very curious about the ways objects are used to convey information and tell stories. Sarah received her PhD in American Studies and her MA and BA in History from Harvard University, as well as an MA from the Winterthur Program in American Material Culture. She is the author of several books and has penned numerous public-facing articles highlighting aspects of material culture. Sarah will be answering questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to post them in the chat at any point. Please welcome Dr. Sarah Ann Carter.
Thank you so much, Maeve. I'm so pleased to be here today to invite all of you to the Center for Design and Material Culture here in the School of Human Ecology, and to invite all of you in particular to visit our fall exhibition, Questioning Things, a quarter century of material culture studies at UW-Madison. In addition to sharing this project, we're going to be peeking behind the scenes at what it takes to create such a complex exhibition. And we'll even spend a few minutes looking way behind the scenes at a quarter century of material culture studies on our campus that paved the way for this work, and the interdisciplinary approaches that Questioning Things models and celebrates. I lead the Center for Design and Material Culture, which is in the School of Human Ecology, where I'm also an associate professor of design studies. Our center focuses on three things. First, design thinking, particularly through our beautiful Dorothy O'Brien Innovation Lab. Second, we focus on the study of textiles. We have a truly world-class textile collection here in the CDMC, the Helen Louise Allen Textile Collection. And here in this picture, Dr. Sophie Pittman, who is our Pleasant Rowland textile specialist and director of research, is joined by Carolyn Jenkinson, our collection manager, and together they are welcoming our chancellor to the textile collection. This was just a few weeks ago. The textile collection is a research and teaching resource that serves dozens of classes each year, and we also curate exhibitions through this collection, which are featured in our Lynn Mecklenburg Textile Gallery. Exhibitions like Uncut Attire, How Weaving Informs Wearables, which is currently on view. And finally, our center is also known for the study of material culture. And that's what brings us together today. So what is material culture? What do I mean when I put those two words together? Well, material culture is a set of interdisciplinary methods that really allow us to study the material traces of the past, whether we're thinking about deep time or the past that has just now passed seconds ago. These traces could be objects or things all around us. They could be landscapes. They could be the material practices that allow us to shape or select the world, among other things. My friend Ivan Gaskell and I describe material culture in our edited book in this way. We take material culture to be physical entities that resonate with communities of humans. These may be physical things that humans have found and selected, adapted, or fashioned for their use, whether physically, cognitively, or both. So material culture is a broad category. A simple way to think about it might be material refers to the stuff of our world, the things that are all around us, while culture refers to the people who engage with, value, understand, think about, and try to make sense of that stuff. So as such, fields of history, art history, history of science, anthropology, history of the book, folklore, all kinds of area studies, art, and of course, my own department of design studies and many others, all engage in material culture methods in diverse ways. Material culture is really not a discipline, but a set of methods. In my past projects, I experimented with the interdisciplinary nature of material culture work. For example, at Harvard University, where I completed my PhD and taught as a lecturer, I was part of the Tangible Things project. My colleagues and I, as part of this project, worked to challenge the ways in which the university sorted and interpreted objects, like the seemingly random assortment of objects shown here. Objects that were often siloed in very different collections across campus and not thought of as part of interdisciplinary work. My collaborators on this project, Professor Laurel Ulrich and then curator Ivan Gaskell, really started teaching around these ideas in exciting and innovative ways. And they challenged students and colleagues at Harvard to put things into new categories, to sort things in new ways, to really think about the interdisciplinary potential of object study. So for example, as part of this project, they suggested that objects from, say, the anthropology collections at Harvard, objects like this fascinating Passamaquoddy silver hat band shown on the left, didn't have to stay in an anthropology collection, and in fact could perfectly fit in an art history display of colonial silver. Or the Tiffany floriform vase shown there on the right. Yes, it's an art object, but why not put it with other flowers in a collection of glass flowers in the Natural History collection? So together, this team developed an exhibit and a book and a popular edX course that came out of all this that at this point, more than 80,000 people have taken, of course, about material culture. So it was a successful project. But unlike here at UW-Madison, there was no interdisciplinary material culture certificate or program that came out of this work at Harvard. Yeah, new connections were made. Yes, relationships were made, particularly through museum collections, which was exciting. But there wasn't the same possibility for the structural curricular support of interdisciplinary material culture work that we've been able to see for the past 25 years here at UW-Madison. Now, my colleague, Professor Ann Smart-Martin, shown here, the Stanley and Polly Stone Chipstone Professor of American Material Culture, came to Madison in 1998, and she saw new connections across campus around the study of material things. And interdisciplinary work brought together a wide range of scholars, and she created the popular Dimensions of Material Culture course, which is one of those courses that seems to be cross-listed everywhere, so people can take it from all over campus. And she also created a certificate program in material culture studies to really value and name the importance of these interdisciplinary methods. As part of the large public research university that we are so privileged to be part of here at Madison, Anne was able to build bridges across campus and from campus into the community through this work. In addition to being a well-respected scholar in the field of material culture, Anne is someone who really developed projects in service of the Wisconsin idea that collaboratively involved many students and colleagues in the work of curating exhibitions and meaningful public history projects. Whether these were students helping with major exhibits at the Smithsonian, and millions of people have seen this exhibit at this point, and read in the credits that this was created by a UW class, material culture class, led by Anne. So national projects, national material culture projects, really meaningful local material culture projects, helping students, working with students to develop important local installations at places like the Mount Horeb Historium, or even curating exhibitions on campus museums like the Chazen. All of these collaborative hands-on projects have been central to the career trajectories of countless material culture students here at Madison, a few of whom came back just a few weeks ago to celebrate the material culture program and Anne's retirement. When I officially became the director of the CDMC in 2020, newly relaunched as a center, I really benefited from Anne's hard work to create a material culture community on our campus and to guide us on the steering committee. When she decided to retire this year, it was clear that the CDMC wanted to honor and thank her. In collaboration with her students, we realized that the best way to honor Anne was through an exhibition, and not just any exhibition. Working closely with alumni of the Material Culture Studies program, we developed a project in which we mined many of Anne's past collaborative work for meaningful objects and stories, and we reflected on new interactive possibilities. We invited almost 50 of Anne's former students and colleagues to contribute question-driven labels about items on view. We collaborated with 9 different campus and area collections, 2 private collections, and had the great fun and challenge of displaying more than 80 items across 10 thematic sections as seen in this exhibition map. And we did all this so that we could think together about how we might question things in new ways. Our team here in the CDMC includes a fantastic professional textile team of Sophie and Carolyn, who I mentioned earlier, Adriana Barrios, who led the installation and organized exhibition events, Laura Sims Peck, who leads operations for the center and sometimes measures mannequins to make sure that we're all on track and doing things correctly. And we're supported by an amazing crew of undergraduate, graduate students, and preparator staff to really help us do this work. And many of our team are actually recent grads of UW-Madison as well. In this way, we really think of the work that we do here. We think of the CDMC here in the School of Human Ecology as truly a museum lab space. It's a space in which our students can get real world experience working in museums that's often hard to get elsewhere. Truly hands-on work. They do amazing, amazing work for us here and with us here in the center. The Material Culture Studies program at UW has long been a training ground for graduates to go on to fields, gone to the museum field. They've gone on to careers as curators, museum directors, conservators, museum educators. And we get to continue that legacy in new and exciting ways here in the CDMC. Maeve, who introduced me today, is shown here with one of the wonderful undergraduates that works with us, Abby, actually installing an 18th century object, something you don't typically get to do when you are a student. Underneath one of our cases here, Kate, who is a Wood MFA student, is wielding power tools to help us make sure everything works properly. The students who work with us really are central to what happens here in the CDMC and allows our exhibitions to really be beautiful. And at the same time, these students are learning from our professional staff. Carolyn Jenkinson shown there, showing a whole group of our student and preparator staff, how do you actually properly display a complex art book, right? This work is nuanced and this work requires hands-on training and skills. And our students are really well poised for exciting jobs in this field. So what are we experimenting with or thinking about in questioning things, or as we came to call it, QT, in this exhibition? What are we thinking about? Well, we wanted to think about truly how visitors could interact with things in new and meaningful ways in our spaces. We wanted to think about new and meaningful ways that could truly highlight material culture methods. Museum exhibits often include a lot of label reading. They often include not as much object looking. Visitors often look at things on display for between 15 and 30 seconds, if that. That's really not much time to ask questions. It's really hard to question things in 15 to 30 seconds. Material culture has to, when it's done well, include an embodied set of practices, close looking, sketching, comparing. So we wanted our visitors to engage as much as possible physically with the exhibition. So to honor the history of material culture studies on campus, we decided to experiment with a whole range of modes of interaction, as well as the things themselves that we put on view. We wanted to create new museum experiences for our audiences here in the School of Human Ecology. This absolutely connects to my own research into the history of how museums have made people feel through time. It also connects to my time at the Chipstone Foundation. During my years at the Chipstone Foundation, where I was curator and director of research prior to my time here at UW-Madison, I was able to work collaboratively on a number of exciting museum projects. These projects that led me to the experiments our team explored in QT are things that I'd love to just really briefly share here today. So for example, you will see and these were projects that we put on at the Milwaukee Art Museum. So hopefully many of you have visited this amazing institution not too far from Madison. For example, one of the projects that really helped me think through some of the work that we did with QT is this exhibition called Neo from the Milwaukee Art Museum. It's an exhibition that was about making the old new again. And we used a gallery guide, walk-around guides, instead of labels in this space. Projects like the Chipstone Cosmos shown here invited visitors to engage at their own pace using a touchscreen to try to invite visitors to spend a little bit more time in the exhibition. Similarly, Mrs. M's cabinet shown here, which is currently on view at the Milwaukee Art Museum, another one of those exciting projects I was so privileged to work on at the Chipstone Foundation, invited visitors to sit down, to look closely, to page through books in the space, to engage. We tried all of these techniques to slow people down and get them to look, engage, think, and learn and enjoy during their time in the gallery. These modes of interaction really pointed to new possibilities for experimentation and engagement in the exhibition space, which is really exciting to think about. And we were able to, in the CDMC, to think about this in some new ways, right? The Ruth Davis Design Gallery here in the School of Human Ecology is truly a museum lab for us. So we could experiment in ways that it's harder to do in a place like the Milwaukee Art Museum or a bigger institution. Our team wanted to experiment with ways to make the gallery experience more like the material culture studies that take place in our classrooms. We wanted to invite visitors to take their time, to look closely, and to ask questions. So with the help of our friends from the Chipstone Foundation, where I had such fun working and creating exhibitions for many years, they hired two fantastic designers out of current projects in Milwaukee. They loaned us objects and they really supported this larger project, and we're so grateful to them. In particular, they loaned us these 5 amazing giant interactive cases that you can come take a look at in questioning things, which really helps scaffold the work that we're able to do in this exhibition. We decided not to include traditional labels in questioning things. Instead, we created a handbook for questioning things that visitors are invited to pick up as they walk through the space, take notes in, and learn about the objects on view. This handbook allowed visitors to look closely at material things before reading about them if they wanted to, or they could start with a handbook and treat it kind of like a scavenger hunt, going through the gallery, finding objects that interested them. This process really invited an unexpected way of interacting with the gallery space. Rather than offering one authoritative curatorial voice, our guests could explore They could read multiple perspectives of the items on view, all of which were signed by alums, collaborators, people who've been part of the Material Culture Studies program over the years here at UW. And this is where we put almost 50 of Professor Ann Smart-Martin's former students and colleagues to work. We put folks to work helping us write these question-driven labels that visitors experience when they open up the handbook for questioning things. One great example of this is the phonograph that Thomas Edison donated to the physics department in 1919. And that's just a third grader there for scale, so you know how big this is. It was part of the History of Science freshman interest group that Professor Lynn Neihart taught with Ann Smart-Martin back in 2013. So when Professor Neihart wrote about it, she's thinking about connections between science and art and humanities. We also invited colleagues from the Wisconsin Historical Society. Dave Driscoll is a curator there, as well as Jody Klaus, who's the director of the Watrous Gallery, to think about the same object. But they were much more interested in histories of recording technology. So the same facts, the same object, but different questions. And visitors are invited to read about this object from these different perspectives, and indeed to ask their own questions too. We wanted to model this process for visitors and invite visitors into this active questioning of all of the things on view in our exhibition. In our section on artists as material culture scholars, artist Martha Glowacki selected two really fantastic reads from the textile collection. One on the left there is actually made from human hair. And we have a pretty fantastic and fascinating collection of hair wreaths here in the Helen Louise Allen textile collection. And these are the kinds of historical objects, historical material culture objects that inspired Martha Glowacki's artwork. She spent a lot of time researching a whole range of material culture objects, objects connected to history of science that have impacted her making practices and inspired the work and the stories that she tells through her artwork. And Martha's work is there framed above these two historic hair wreaths. There's one historic hair wreath and one wreath actually made out of yarn from our collection. So in the handbook for questioning things, visitors can read about the historic objects as well as Martha's artwork inspired by them. And then visitors are invited to use the handbook to reflect and sketch. You know, the handbook leaves spaces for note-taking, for sketches, for reflection. We invite visitors to say, what objects should we include? What's missing? How might we better tell this story? What do you see? What questions are you asking? So far more interactive than many museum exhibitions. At least that's our goal, that's our hope, that we're inviting that kind of interaction, we're inviting slow looking, we're inviting the possibility of visitors to spend some time, to ask some questions, to make new connections. Another theme that we explored is the connections between natural and cultural histories. One of my favorite objects from this part of the exhibition is this giant beetle. And this is one of Azu's late 19th or early 20th century French paper mache models of insects. And this is on loan from the UW-Madison Zoological Museum. Now, this giant beetle, which is humorously large, was state-of-the-art science pedagogy in the late 19th century, something that was likely purchased after the Science Hall fire of 1884. And so was used for instruction. It's a pedagogical object. In fact, its wings open up almost like a book to reveal more information about this seemingly monstrous thing. But it's also kind of playful and weird and almost sculptural. And indeed, when we reached out to many of the students and colleagues who had worked with Anne for many years, Ellery Fouch, who was a postdoctoral fellow mentored at Anne while she was at Madison. Ellery Fouch is now an art history professor at Middlebury College. really wanted to write about this wild thing. And she actually paired it with this archival photograph shown here, in which two late 19th century science students playfully bring these models outside, seemingly to imagine, what would it be like to find these giant things in nature. And I love the caption, scientific, scientific, but also playful and strange and interesting, both from a late 19th century and an early 21st century perspective. Another category of objects that we thought about were things that hold stories. And in this case, we have many wonderful ceramics on view, both on loan from our friends at the Chazen Museum, as well as from the Chipstone Foundation. And I invite you to come and explore these drawers and to spend some time looking at the objects in this case, objects that hold many meaningful stories, whether it's the large charger and that open drawer to the right, which features an amazing image of Queen Elizabeth, or the hung bowl shown there in the background, featuring a harbor scene from busy, what was then Canton, but is now Guangzhou Harbor. So a lot of really amazing objects that will certainly repay close looking. But my favorite item in this case, or pair of items in this case, has to be these two items, these two chamber pots that were explored by Dr. Glenn Adamson, who is the former director of the Museum of Art and Design in New York. And he was someone who taught with Anne and was one of her colleagues when he was here at Madison. Now, Glenn selected these two rather humorous chamber pots and invited visitors to look closely and to peek inside. And as you'll see inside one of these pots, we have this rather strange fellow exclaiming, oh dear me, what do I see? So objects can hold stories, and they can also be quite humorous and interesting. And we can imagine, how did people through time understand and engage with these fascinating things on view and questioning things? Another whole category of objects that we thought about in this exhibition were from the Driftless Historium for the Mount Horeb Historical Society. And they were really wonderful collaborators in this project and loaned several objects that we could display here, in large part because they had so closely collaborated with Anne and her students over the years. So we really are grateful for that relationship. In this section, Regional Histories at the Driftless Historium, Maddie Hagerman, who's now the director of the undergraduate art conservation program at the University of Delaware, also an alum of the material culture studies program, she mused on the really fantastic pink shoes shown there. And she wrote her label thusly, quoting, "The first pair of shoes I ever rose modeled." Olga Edseth wrote on the bottom of these pink kitten heels. Purchased at a garage sale and embellished by Olga, the painted shoes illustrate the Scandinavian tradition of transforming utilitarian objects into works of art. As an objects conservator, as Maddie is, I cannot help but wonder, what type of paint did Olga use? These different questions and perspectives help visitors think about all the pathways into object study, all of the possible ways one might imagine and think about and ask questions about things, and some of the possible careers that could be on the other side of that work. In Maddie's case, thinking about conservation. How do you care for and preserve material things? And questions like, what kind of paint is on those shoes, is a really important question to people in that field. Another group of objects, as in this case, that we call binding concepts. And here we were so privileged to be able to engage with amazing books from special collections and from the Kohler Library. And there's really a pretty fantastic group of objects here. The book shown there on the shelf, which is the open book there on the lower shelf, is actually not a printed book at all, but in fact woven in silk thread with pixel-like precision. It's actually a woven book. Beneath that, my colleague Anna Simon, who's the director of the Colored Library, is looking closely at a wonderful artist book that blurs lines between typing and weaving, a work called Draft Notation by Jen Bervin. So this case is full of a range of really amazing books that don't always look like books, but that can help us tell really exciting material culture stories if we ask the right questions. And we have the time to look closely and to think about them in an interdisciplinary way that allows us to make meaningful connections. This case also includes ostensibly functional objects, like this pincushion that fascinatingly was used, for more than sewing. This object was likely created by a Native American craftsperson working in an Eastern Woodlands design tradition and then sold for income. So it's a tool in a couple of different ways. And so even though a Native person sold this object, its designs and the generation of cultural traditions that it represents was not for sale. And this is the kind of object that the CDMC team who's working on this larger project around from cultural appropriation to cultural appreciation, a really key material culture project that we've been working on within the CDMC. This team really wondered, how can an object like this help us think about asymmetrical power relations? Or could it help us think about, what are some ways in which material culture methods of close looking, comparison, asking questions, how can some of those methods potentially be tools for positive social change? It could help us do meaningful work together. So through the handbook, reading and exploring with, and I like to think about this as exploring with so many advanced students and colleagues, so many friends at the Center for Design and Material Culture, visitors were able to experience the items on view in their own way and ask questions, take notes, and sketch their ideas in the handbook. Another kind of experiment that we were trying to do in this museum lab space was really around lighting. And this was inspired by Anne's own research. We created this little room working closely with the current project's design firm in which visitors can play with the temperature of the lights using hue bulbs. Anna's been working on a fascinating project called Material Cultures of the Immaterial, Artificial Light in Early America, that looks at histories of reflection in early America. And this project focuses on reflective surfaces and how ideas about light changed over time. And she's really asking us, we're artisans trying to help us think about or thinking about the ways in which lights flickered or shimmered as they were creating material culture objects in the 18th and 19th centuries. And so we created this space, really exploring these ideas. With the help of Chipstone, we borrowed a beautiful 18th century looking glass shown there. This is an object that fits quite well into Anne's interpretation of a complex reflective object. So it's a mirror, it's a reflective object, but it's also surrounded by, shiny mahogany veneer, gilt. It's shiny in lots of different ways. And we invited visitors to see themselves reflected in this looking glass and indeed to adjust the light temperature in the space to make it, cooler or warmer, and to watch how that changed the way the object looked. It changed their experience of looking in the glass. And this was a way to begin to wonder with and through some of the conditions, the weirdly immaterial material conditions that Anne has been studying and is continuing to write about. And galleries, as we all know, are often full of lights. So as visitors, you're not supposed to see them. Galleries often have low lights designed to protect fragile paper or cloth on display. But in this space, the light was one of the qualities visitors could experiment with, could play with, could think with. And so this was another way that we were able to use the very form of the exhibition to think through how might we question things together in new ways. The third area of experimentation for us here in QT is the chair park. Now, this was a reimagining of an installation from the Chipstone Foundation, and the chair park is a collection of historic and reproduction chairs visitors can try out, sit in, discuss. Chairs you can not just look at. It's always seemed quite silly when you walk into a museum and you see a beautiful chair on display. You're like, I want to sit in it. I want to try it out. What does that feel like? Well, you can do that in the chair park. 7 of these chairs were borrowed from the Chipstone Foundation, from the giant globe garden chair by Peter Opsvig, to an example of a Wassily chair by Marshall Brower, to a reproduction of a Campeche chair made by John Hemmings for Thomas Jefferson, to whom he was enslaved. Design Studies Professor Emerita Terry Boyd even offered us 2 of her own chairs to help us round out this collection. So we'd have a really fantastic, diverse group of chairs for our visitors to experiment with and think through together. So as we take a look at the chairs and we try them out, it's really interesting to ask people, so if all these things ostensibly do the same thing, they're all chairs, why do they look so different? Something which helps our visitors begin to think about, well, do they all do the same thing? What does a chair do? How do we think about the built environment around us? How do we think about the furniture that we interact with every day? These are really meaningful material culture questions. They're also pretty fascinating questions for us to think about, in my home department of design studies as well. What is a chair? And how do we make sense of it? Well, when I visit this space with groups, I often ask visitors, for one word to describe their experience of each chair. Sometimes people start with pretty straightforward words like, oh, it's smooth, or it's solid, or it's comfortable. But then over time, words like, oh, it's powerful. This chair makes me think about, posture in a new way. I think about royalty. I think about, a family. This chair makes me think, ease, or about music, right? All of these different things become ways that people can begin to imagine these spaces and how these chairs might make them feel. And sometimes new concepts come to materialize after a few minutes as folks try out multiple chairs, often spending several minutes in the space. And this attentiveness is yet another material culture approach. So to heighten this quality of the exhibition and to make it more interesting, we included yet another interactive element here, yet another piece of material culture for folks to experiment with. We included Polaroid cameras in this part of the exhibition. So we all know we're living in a selfie moment. So we wanted to do something that fed into that desire. People love taking pictures of themselves and the people they care about. But we wanted to do something a little more analog, a little bit more material. So with the Polaroid cameras in the space, you can only take one shot. There are 10 shots per roll. Often it requires an assistant, someone to help you snap your picture. And we don't always put out film. It's something kind of special that you might find if you visit us here in QT. So we asked people to pick a chair, to think about which chair they want to pick, to strike a pose, and then to wait around in the chair park for several minutes, trying other chairs, discussing what you've noticed. You're waiting around as the image that you just snapped slowly develops in your hand, right? And when you're done, you've created your own object with its own material qualities. Polaroids have their own really interesting design history. And of great interest to me, it slowed you down in the gallery. It got you to sit, it got you to pay attention, it got you to think about how you were experiencing that space, perhaps in a new way. This exhibition, Questioning Things, is really as collaborative as we can make it. We included, as collaborative as we can make it. And like all good material culture projects, I believe all good material culture projects are at some level inherently collaborative. That's really central to material culture methodology, in my view. So not only did I get to work with 3 of Anne's wonderful students, Ryan Grover, Courtney Anderson Kramer, and Jared Lee Schmidt, I also had 2 very close graduate student collaborators on this project, Maeve Hogan, who you met earlier, and Natalie Wright, as well as the amazing CDMC team who makes all of this possible, 11 loaning institutions, and almost 50 label writers. So just think about the extent of that collaboration and all of the minds and voices and hands that are required to make a project like this possible. And it's so important to remember that our visitors help complete this exhibit with their interaction. Okay. And if you want to learn more about some of these collaborators, you can join us at a university collections panel that we're going to be having in a couple of weeks to learn more about some of the ways in which we're collaborating to do this kinds of collection focused work on campus. And we snuck in an additional opportunity for collaboration in tangible things. We included an empty drawer in the exhibit. And this is an empty drawer that my colleague, Professor Marina Moskovitz, is going to be working with her students to fill this semester. Marina is teaching the class Dimensions of Material Culture that Anne created many years ago. And it's absolutely wonderful to think about how we can continue to collaborate and learn and work with students studying material culture on campus, even students who are learning it for the first time this semester. As I walk through questioning things with my colleagues here in human ecology, I'm really gratified to see lots of connections to unexpected places that perhaps I hadn't even thought of when we put objects on view earlier this semester. You know, historic children's clothes on view can help us connect to, say, human development and family studies, or to the Child Development Lab, which is just down the hall from the Center for Design and Material Culture here in Nancy Nicholas Hall. Or perhaps an item like this might raise new questions about how people value things, questions that are really quite relevant to my colleagues who teach financial coaching, and many, many other contexts that can help us think about how material culture can connect not only within the School of Human Ecology, but truly across campus. These questions and connections really matter to our many material culture collaborators, past, present, and future. We hope that QT will continue to invite new reflections on material culture possibilities for interdisciplinary study here in the School of Human Ecology. We're working hard to build on the past 25 years. And I should say, I've only shared a handful of the 80+ objects currently on view in QT. We really hope that you'll come visit us in the Center for Design and Material Culture and see the rest. You know, come open some drawers, take a Polaroid, explore the exhibit. And when you do, I'd like you to please try out the chair park and let me know which chair you like best and why. Thank you all so much. And I'm happy to take some questions.
Sarah, thank you so much. That was so thought-provoking, and really happy to get a glimpse into this very exciting space. Hello, everyone. Fran Paleo-Moyer, Badger Talks producer. We're talking to Dr. Sarah Ann Carter about all things material on the UW campus, and we've got an amazing glimpse into this Questioning Things exhibit that she shared with us today. Just as sort of a housekeeping thing, can you let us know specifically where the exhibit is?
Sure.
And access to it.
Sure. The exhibition is in Nancy Nicholas Hall, which is the School of Human Ecology on Linden Drive. And it's in the first floor of Nancy Nicholas Hall in the Ruth Davis Design Gallery. The exhibition is open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Wednesday from 10 to 4, Thursday 10 to 7, Friday 10 to 4, and Saturday and Sunday afternoons. All that information is on our website, the Center for Design and Material Culture website. And yeah, we'd love to have you visit us. And if you want to visit us at a different time, you can reach out and we'd be happy to try to accommodate, especially if it's for a class group.
Excellent. And
towards.
I did post a link in the
Thank
chat
you.
for people who are interested as well. So,
Okay.
so one thing that really resonated with me is last month, some of our regular viewers probably know, and I'm wondering if this resonated with you, if some of our regular viewers are tuning in, but the work of students and the impact that that makes around the work being done on campus. I heard it over and over again with cancer research, and I'm hearing it here loud and clear. I just want to say that I think that's such an important part of everything that we're hearing in the work of faculty, and that students' work, how critical it is. So thank you for sharing that piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's something that, especially now that, for the past year, we're really able to be here on campus doing this work together, working in the textile collection, doing these complicated installs. I'm watching our students, and we have an amazing team of undergraduate and graduate students really learning how to become museum professionals right in front of my eyes, and doing work that, in museum context, students would very rarely get to do, but we're able to train these students, and they're really quite amazing in terms of their hand skills, their research skills, and really connecting material work that they're doing to the big ideas of the exhibition.
So one thing that also struck me as you were doing this very thoughtful presentation and encouraging, reaching out to people to like sit and think, and so your field just promotes creative thinking, mindful thought exploration. As a mom of 3 children and thinking about how our culture is now, where it's more of a digital age and very fast moving, what are the implications of that with your work?
Yeah, I think, it's funny. I'm very inspired by, say, like Montessori methods. I think there are actually really clear connections within material culture studies to histories of object-based learning. And this is something I've done a lot of research on. I've written a book about histories of object-based learning that are actually really connected to like Montessori methods, object-based learning, having children actually engage with material things and not just engage digitally. And so I think the kinds of work that we're doing around material culture is inviting our students and inviting the broader public to recognize that through close looking, through comparison, through object study, you can actually learn a lot about the world. And any one of these objects becomes the center, almost imagine like a wagon wheel, the sort of the center of that wheel that could get you to all of these different ideas, all of these different possibilities. But if you start with close looking, you start with material engagement, it opens up new doors. And I'm certainly, there's lots of, not against learning online. There's so many ways that you can engage digitally. But I think sometimes using your senses, it can be something that is overlooked when we're so focused on engaging digitally. That's why we wanted, not to have like a selfie station, but to actually have Polaroid cameras, because we could talk about the design history of Polaroid cameras, but we could also scaffold a material experience that allowed someone to physically be in the space, to, shake that Polaroid picture for a few minutes. It's like, when will this develop? But as they're doing it, they're looking around, they're trying different chairs, they're talking about it, they're noticing some of the material constraints that the world around them might offer that opens up possibilities for creativity and connection making. And then many of those same people, took out their phones and snapped pictures of the analog Polaroid picture that they had pinned up on the board, and that was something that they shared on their social media. So, it's not mutually exclusive. I think there are ways that the digital and the analog can intersect.
Great, thank you so much. And in your introduction, we learned that you've been engaging with museums and interested in museums since you were a teenager. And I'm going to put you on the spot here for a minute. I'm wondering if you can recollect a museum experience or other experience that impacted you, that sort of led you to the career path you have now chosen.
Yeah, that's a great question, because there is something that I absolutely think about all the time that actually really almost very directly led me down the material culture path. So when I was a teenager, I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Boston, and we sometimes would spend some time in rural parts of Vermont. And we went to this little museum up there in St. Johnsbury. And I saw these two dolls, and they were dressed. This is a very Halloween appropriate story. They were dressed in like morning clothes. So these two little dolls are dressed in these black dresses. And I just remember being like, what is going on here? Because it seemed so incongruous to me, even as a teenager. Like, well, dolls are for fun. Dolls are supposed to be happy. Like, dolls are about childhood. They're joyful. Why are these dolls going to a funeral? And that really stuck with me. And it stuck with me because it didn't quite make sense, right? I was like, that's just so strange. And actually, when I went on to college, I ended up writing my senior thesis about that topic and really thinking about histories of doll play and how do we make sense of things that might seem incongruous, but in a 19th century context, children were taught about mourning, perhaps in ways they're not taught about today. And so I think that being in those spaces and being invited to look closely and being invited to be confused, I mean, that can be a great pedagogical opportunity when you're like, what is going on here? And then sometimes that can inspire a lot of work and new questions, and that can be really motivating, as it was for me. So yeah, those dolls and funeral clothes really set me off on a very interesting career path.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thanks again for giving us a glimpse into this super interesting world, and love the handbook idea with the exhibit. We'll definitely be taking a trip over. Can't wait to check it out.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. All right. Well, we'll be continuing to celebrate the School of Human Ecology. Next Tuesday, October 11th at noon, we're going to be welcoming Dr. Dipesh Navsaria. And this is also going to be a special talk celebrating the Wisconsin Science Festival at the same time, which is happening next week. Please search the Wisconsin Science Festival online. There, I believe, are over 200 events happening around the state, and this is just simply one that is a part of that larger festival. So Dipesh is going to be talking about why diversity in children's books matter to us all, a very interesting topic and important. So please tune in. Visit badgertalks.wis.edu. You can see the list of upcoming events through the end of this calendar year. You can see the podcast, which Ben Rush, who hosts our Badger Talks podcast, did an interview which just released today with Dipesh Navsaria. So please check that out. Sign up for our email list. Consider a donation to Badger Talks. We are grant funded. And then you can also search the roster of over 400 UW faculty and staff who are signed up to give talks around the state in communities like yours on issues that are important to you. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.